What's going on, everybody? Welcome into a very fun video powered by BetUS, as today I'm going to be reacting to the Portland Trail Blazers released schedule. Now, the schedule dropped approximately 2.5 hours ago. I have not seen it yet as I was in meetings, and then when I sat down to record it, my old mic blew out, so I got a new mic. It's literally the same mic. Maybe it sounds better, I'm not sure. But now I'm finally ready to sit down and look at the schedule for the first time. I haven't opened up Twitter. I haven't opened up ESPN. I have not seen a single thing regarding the Portland Trail Blazers schedule, as this year I just wanted to give my raw, honest reaction as I looked at it. In previous years, I've done month-by-month strength of schedule breakdowns and that sort of thing, but with the Blazers looking at capturing the flag, and that of course is Cooper flag, we're not going to be breaking it down in terms of strength. Basically, every team the Blazers play is probably going to be better than them, but maybe they can surprise some people this year. And now that the schedule was released, this is the perfect time to get in on futures with BetUS, as they're offering you a 125% bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000 with my link in the description box below. You can get in on a ton of fun NBA future lines over there on their website. You can do the same for NFL if you're into football. And for some Blazer related stuff, you can bet their over-under win total right now, which is at 22.5, and you can also get in on lines for Donovan Clingan, such as his over-under point total at 9.5. So go below the video to check out BetUS and get in on the action. Now, of course, this upcoming season will have post-game shows for every game. Looking forward to getting those up and running again. And without further ado, I'm going to pull up the schedule and see who the Blazers have for their opening night matchup, as well as when Dame returns to Portland for the second time. So opening day, the Blazers play at home on Wednesday against the Golden State Warriors. I feel like the past couple years, the Blazers have had a road game for their first game. But this year, their first 3 games is at home, which is awesome because, honestly, the first 3 or 4 games of the year are games that feel like they actually mean something before the Blazers ultimately end up losing a bunch and tank season begins, right? So it's always fun to have home games earlier in the year for a rebuilding team, and that game is going to be Steph Curry versus Scoot Henderson. If Scoot Henderson starts, we still have to wait and see on what happens with that, but that should be a fun matchup. The second and third home games, I don't like that the NBA does this, are against the New Orleans Pelicans in back-to-back games. This isn't baseball. I'm not a fan of playing the same team twice in a row, especially the second and third game of the year. So CJ McCollum's return to Portland. You can catch him on the 25th or the 27th of October. That 27th, it looks like, will be an earlier game as well. And then the Blazers have a ton of road games. Sacramento Clippers, they come back home to face OKC, but then head out on the road against Phoenix, New Orleans, San Antonio, Minnesota. One thing I'm looking for is how many games are in November, because last year the Blazers played 17 games in November, and it was absolutely crazy. So this year, let me do the counting. Only 15 games in November. That's better. They also have a stretch here, which is just kind of ridiculous. On the 8th, 12th, and 13th of November, they play the Minnesota Timberwolves. So they play the Timberwolves 3 out of 4 games. Later on in the month, they have a back-to-back against Houston as well. And as I'm looking at this, the Blazers only play 1 Eastern Conference road game until January 4th, and that is a November 27th matchup at Indiana. And if you look on the right side of the schedule, they have a 7-game Eastern Conference road trip in late February to early March. And then they have a 4-game Eastern Conference trip from March 30th to April 4th. And just looking at the schedule, and I might be wrong on this, let me know if you agree or not, but it seems like there are much larger stretches in terms of road trips and then homestands. Just looking in November, 4-game road trip, 4-game homestand, 5-game road trip. Later in the year, the Blazers have a 7-game homestand in January going into February, and then that 7-game Eastern Conference road trip that I talked about. And then they have yet another 7-game homestand in March. The benefit of that is it should cut down on flight miles. I'd be interested to see what the total is for the Blazers this year compared to previous seasons, but it seems like flight miles should be a little bit lower because it appears to me that there's a little less going home and then on the road, then back home, then on the road. Last year, the Blazers had like a 3-game Eastern Conference trip that they went on the road for and then came back home. They do have another one of those in January at Miami, at Orlando, and at Charlotte. That's kind of ridiculous for flight miles, especially because they play the 19th at home against Chicago, and then fly all the way to Miami for that 21st date, and then have a back-to-back at Orlando, at Charlotte, and then come back home. Small Eastern Conference trips contributes heavily to flight mileage at the end of the season because they're flying all the way over to the East Coast and not knocking out that many games over there, and then coming back. Something else I'm looking for is just how many instances of back-to-backs do they have? You have New Orleans in October, Minnesota in November, you got Houston in November as well. And then there's really not many of them until February 1st and February 3rd, back-to-backs against the Phoenix Suns, and normally we collaborate with Suns Valley Podcast during that time. Kind of sucks that they play Phoenix back-to-back times. They also play at Phoenix on November 2nd, and they only have 3 games planned against the Suns. Denny Avdia will return to Washington on February 26th, and then Damian Lillard will return to Portland on January 28th. Which I think is almost identical to when he returned to Portland last season. And also, that's the Blazers' only nationally televised game outside of NBA TV. No surprise there. Now, back to counting back-to-backs. The 5th one of the season is at Denver on February 10th and 12th. And then, unless I'm missing something, they don't have another instance like that the rest of the season. Most games in a month is 16 in January. They do play a lot in February, considering the All-Star break is in the middle of that month, and they'll have 8 days off from February 12th to February 20th. With that 8-game layoff, and with the month being only 28 days, the Blazers play 12 games, which is kind of crazy. That's basically a 12-game and 20-day stretch. Now, looking at back-to-backs, November is pretty filled with them. There's also a 1-game and 6-day stretch, that game being November 17th against Atlanta at home. And then another thing I love about this schedule is the early games aren't too brutal. A lot of them are actually at home, such as 3 p.m. on November 17th against Atlanta, 3 p.m. on January 26th at home against OKC, 3 p.m. against Toronto on March 16th. Not counting the last day of the season because all those games are early, there's only one time where the Blazers play before 3 p.m. Pacific time, and that is on March 2nd when they play at 12:30 on the road against the Cavaliers. So I'm honestly a big fan of that, and then the start of the season is going to be interesting because the Blazers play a ton of Western Conference teams. The first Eastern Conference game is that January 17th matchup against Atlanta. And the West is extremely deep this year. In the first 13 games of the season, they'll play Minnesota 3 times. Of course, they made it to the Western Conference Finals. They'll play New Orleans 3 times. They traded for DeJounte Murray. The Golden State Warriors and Clippers are going to be interesting this year. Sacramento, I think, is a little overrated. I think there's a small chance that the Blazers could be about 500, like 8 games into the season, but then it just gets rough. San Antonio's going to be better. Minnesota, like I said, Memphis. It's tough to analyze which stretches of the schedule look tough because I think the NBA is as deep as ever with quality teams, and the Blazers I don't view as one of those quality teams. Really, the only bottom feeders you have, in my opinion, are the Utah Jazz, the Brooklyn Nets, the Charlotte Hornets, and the Washington Wizards. And those games are kind of just sprinkled throughout the schedule. Now, if you want to see Victor Wembanyama play next year, it looks like his first and only game in Portland is on April 6th, so right at the end of the season. I don't see a home game against San Antonio earlier on the schedule, unfortunately. The Blazers play at the Spurs on the road on November 7th, as well as December 21st. No Christmas Day game, of course. The Blazers will play the day after Christmas, which they've been doing for quite some time now. And you can let me know what other oddities you found in the schedule down in the comments section below. I used to get super excited for schedule releases when the Blazers were actually playing for something. Now it's just a little bit different, but still fun nonetheless. And we also got to celebrate the Blazers leaving Root Sports. We'll have a stream later tonight where we'll talk more about the schedule. We'll talk more about the Blazers ditching Root Sports, which I'm super excited about. So make sure you tune in for that live stream tonight, going live approximately 9 to 9:30 p.m. Pacific time. Also, make sure to check out BetUS in the description box below. Get in on some of those fun futures that they're offering. And I am out of here. I'll catch you next time. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.